Hello, and welcome to Mysteries Unveiled, the forensic science podcast where we unveil mysteries and how they apply to our everyday lives. On this podcast, I want to talk about assignment number 13, the blood stain pattern analysis. The blood spatter is a technique that seeks to piece together the events that cause bleeding. Also, knowing how the blood got on a wall or other surface can be helpful in solving or determining a crime, how it was committed, and if blood is evidence in that crime. So, when doing this assignment, we had to understand the blood patterns, which is when blood is found at a crime scene. Basically, its pattern can tell investigators a lot when they're trying to solve crimes. They can figure out how the blood got there and even the movements or even how people were involved in the incident. Another thing to consider is that the size of each blood spatter matters. When analyzing blood spatters, the scientists pay close attention to the size of each drop. The larger drops might suggest that a more forceful impact had happened, like a gunshot or something, while smaller drops would come from something like a minor cut. Another important thing is following the trail. This is something that investigators do a lot, and by examining the shape and direction of the bloodstains, investigators can piece together the sequence of events. For example, if blood had smeared in one direction, it might indicate someone tried to clean it up, try to hide it away. Another important aspect of this assignment is that angle matters. The angle at which the blood hits the surface is very crucial. By measuring the angle of each blood spatter, experts can determine the direction of where the blood came from and how it moved, helping to reconstruct the scene accurately. Basically, like seeing how the murder happened, how they were murdered, with what kind of weapon, all that good stuff. So, while completing this assignment, I found it very interesting because we were counting the number of blood spatters, blood drops, all of that. We were measuring the stain size, the number of stains, and the frequency. And when you all add that up, it gives a very detailed explanation of where it happened, what kind of weapon was used, and basically will tell you how it happened. Another part that I thought was really interesting was being able to trace the direction of motion from the blood source, like pointing arrows to where the blood spatters happen. And basically, it'll tell you exactly where the murder happened because the blood spatters away from the murder, basically leaving a trail from which the suspect was murdered. And the last part of the assignment, which I found the most interesting, was when there were 5 blood spots and there were 5 arrows that pointed away from it that all connected to one point of origin. There were 5 blood stains that intercepted at the middle of which the arrows connected, and this was due to the fact that the murder or the blood spill happened in one area or origin, and the blood spatter traces its spot to that origin or the place that it occurred where the murder happened. And I felt it was really interesting because you can tell a lot from which the murder happened and how it happened. And overall, I would have never known this since I'd taken this class, that investigators in forensic science have to go through this every day and in every situation. It's very interesting the way that they conduct their research and investigating crime scenes, especially through blood spatters. One of the most famous murders that was caught was the O.J. Simpson case. So, what happened here was on June 12th, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were found brutally murdered outside of Nicole's home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. The crime scene was a crucial starting point for investigators, and bloodstains, which we talked about, were among the most significant pieces that were of evidence collected. The bloodstains were found at various locations, including the victims' bodies, on the ground near the bodies, and inside of the famous O.J. Simpson's white Ford Bronco. The analysis of these bloodstains revealed that DNA profiles consistent with Nicole and Ron, as well as mixtures of DNA indicating multiple contributors, led back to the victims. The forensic experts were able to examine the bloodstains using techniques such as luminal testing, which reveals hidden blood traces, and DNA analysis, which was able to identify the genetic profiles of individuals that were present in the blood samples. The analysis provided crucial information about the events surrounding the murders and the individuals involved. Now, the most important part of how this applies to our assignment was how the investigators analyzed those bloodstains. And by analyzing the distribution and patterns of these bloodstains, the forensic experts reconstructed the likely sequence of events that leaded up to the following murders of Nicole and Ron Goldman, and this helped them establish the key facts about the crime, such as the locations where the victims were and where they were attacked, and the movements of O.J. Simpson. And how this linked to O.J. Simpson was one of the most biggest piece of evidence presented by the prosecution was O.J. Simpson's blood that was left at the crime scene in his vehicle. His blood stains inside the Bronco, his blood spatters, they both match O.J. Simpson's DNA profile, indicated his direct involvement to the murders. In the end, the blood splatter analysis by the forensic science team played a very crucial role in the investigation of the O.J. Simpson trial because by examining the patterns and the distribution of blood at the crime scene, the forensic science experts were able to reconstruct the sequence of events that led up to the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The direction of and shape of the blood stains provided valuable clues about dynamics and the crime, such as the angle and the force of the blows that were inflicted on the victims by OJ. This information then helped investigators piece together a timeline of events and then be able to identify potential subjects. However, despite there being a lot of evidence against OJ, the trial ended with him being found not guilty by the jury, despite there being a strong evidence presented by the prosecution. The defense team raised doubts about the integrity about the forensic analysis. But even though the blood evidence seemed to point toward OJ's being guilty, he was not found guilty in the end. And later on, this decision surprised a lot of people, and it sparked a big debate about how the justice system works, especially in big, famous cases like this. A current event where blood pattern analysis was used was with the Golden State Killer Joseph James DeAngelo. Blood splatter analysis played a huge role in linking DeAngelo to the crimes. The forensic experts were able to examine bloodstains that were found at various crime scenes, and they used the patterns to understand the dynamics of his attacks. This helped the investigators establish connections between different crime scenes and, in the end, identified DeAngelo as the criminal. In 2018, DeAngelo was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and other crimes that span across multiple decades. His conviction was a huge breakthrough and one of the most unsolved crimes throughout the U.S. history. During this investigation of the Golden State Killer, they were able to look at factors such as the shape, the size, and the distribution of how the bloodstains to understand how the attacks happen. They used pattern recognition, which is studying the bloodstain patterns. Through this, the experts were able to reconstruct the events of each crime scene. They were able to determine the type of weapon that was used, the position of the victim and criminal, and the force of each blow that was inflicted. And then Linking the crime scenes, the investigators compared the blood spatter patterns across different crime scenes, and this helped them to establish connections between unrelated cases. The similarities in the patterns provided a lot of evidence that the same criminal was responsible for the same attacks. How they were able to identify D'Angelo was once the investigators had a clear picture of the blood splatter patterns and other forensic evidence, they were able to narrow down their list of suspects, being D'Angelo, a former police officer. He was the most suspected suspect based on DNA evidence and bloodstain patterns. And then in 2018, D'Angelo was finally arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and other crimes that led him to be called the Golden State Killer. The bloodstain analysis, along with DNA evidence, played a significant role in securing his conviction. In the end, I thought that the assignment that we did about bloodstain patterns was very interesting because these patterns are just like puzzle pieces that help the detectives understand how the crimes happen and what kind of weapon was used. And this leads to them prosecuting someone and catching the bad guys. But in the end, I hope you guys learn a lot about bloodstain patterns and the famous crime about O.J. Simpson and our current crime about the Golden State Killer. This is our last episode, and I want to say thank you for tuning into the podcast. And this is the end. I hope you guys have a good one. Thank you for tuning into Mysteries Unveiled. Goodbye.